Petra, the carved, not constructed, city in the desert cliffs. For centuries, adventurers referred to it as the rose-red city half as old as time. But now, artificial intelligence has lifted off the desert sands and rebuilt what Petra actually looked like in its prime. And the outcome? It's not the bodice-ripping lost city we dreamed about. The AI revealed engineering secrets, lost technologies, and creepy warnings inscribed in stone. Might Petra's grandeur have been hiding something much darker? And why did such brilliance disappear into dust? If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel Spark Science, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. The city carved from living rock. Most people think of bricks stacked into walls, columns pulled upright, or blocks dragged into position when they envision ancient cities. Petra was different. It wasn't constructed, it was carved. Emerging from the cliffs of southern Jordan, its temples, tombs, and theaters weren't constructed of quarried rock but carved straight from the mountains themselves. Picture hiking through a desert canyon for almost a mile, only to come out and find yourself before a 127-foot-high temple facade, not standing alone, but carved like an enormous sculpture into a wall of sandstone, vertical and sheer. That was Petra's secret, a city grown from living rock. For the Nabataeans, the nomadic desert people who turned Petra into a city, stone wasn't mere material, it was fate. They carved over 800 monumental fronts on the face of the cliff, each fusing Greco-Roman majesty with their own desert savoir-faire. Columns, capitals, statues, and pediments weren't positioned piece by piece, they were cut out of the face of the cliff in one single burst of creation. All features were cut top-down, starting with the urns and pediments way at the top, before laborers descended leaving behind completed facades as smooth and crisp as anything in Athens or Rome. In front of the treasury, Petra's most well-known monument, one stands agog at trying this sort of daring. The columns rise nearly double the height of Mount Rushmore's columns, towering 80 feet high, elaborately capped with carvings of the creatures of legend. There is not any sign of supports or scaffolding. We are left wondering how they did it. This has been the subject of much speculation by archaeologists for the past 200 years, until a tomb higher up on the cliff, found to be unfinished, revealed its secrets. The Nabataeans carved their way down, working from the top. Ramps into the lower levels were efficiently created from the rubble generated by the carving itself. When the facade was finished, the final remnant of their working platforms had vanished as if by magic. It seemed the city had always hovered out of the rock. Designs for building all sorts of facades would have included a very orderly methodology, the cross-cutting and highly accurate mapping of the individual tool marks and chisel strokes on the facades. Spontaneously generated designs turn out to have been deliberately conceived. Even the facades of some can be said to bear witness to a modular conception, a clear repetition of proportions, and some design acts seem to have rendered the Nabataeans less a people who sculpted than mathematicians operating on some sort of secret blueprint. But Petra was much more than a vast necropolis. It was an urban center. It was a crossroads of culture, a show of force. There were some 20 to 30,000 inhabitants of the place at its height. Downtown sprawled across some 2 square kilometers of temples, houses, and markets, with suburbs radiating back from the valley. Even the sculpting of a theater seating capacity of 6,000 from solid rock, practical, symbolical too. All at Petra was ambition, a people who had learned desert trade routes, then stamped their wealth and vision into rock that they had believed to be permanent. But one thing we have no doubt about, the architecture of Petra raises uncomfortable questions. Why create a city out of the rocks when other ancient powers were constructing it from the ground up? Why settle in an area where barely any water could be seen, where wood was always scarce, and where devastation was always imminent due to flash floods? Historians have long romantically ascribed it to brilliant engineering and accommodation to the desert environment. But with the AI reconstruction now, the tale thickens. It revealed that Petra's facades were not haphazard expressions of artistic excess, rather, they followed iterative geometric rules, golden proportions, and template standardization, that is, parts of much greater system. This wasn't merely art, this was encoded with a purpose. Petra wasn't necessarily carved to be shown off. Primarily, it was carved to represent and perhaps contain concealed knowledge. Even the stone itself that provided Petra so much majesty might have considered being as well a medium that constructed knowledge beyond mere decoration. Might the sandstone carvings that we recognize as tombs and facades possess certain kinds of built-in systems that convey mathematical equations, proportions, and alignments that are invisible to the naked eye but become apparent on charting the data? But to learn Petra's secrets of AI, you must first get your head around the impossible achievement that made it possible in the first place: water in the desert. The oasis that shouldn't be if Petra's architecture was illogical, the fact that it existed at all in the desert was impossible. Settled in one of the driest regions on the planet, the city spilled over into arid cliffs where rain registered at a few inches annually. And yet, in its heyday, Petra flourished with a population of 20,000 to 30,000 inhabitants, a city teeming with markets, temples, and tourists. The question plagued generations of archaeologists: how could the city have functioned in an area where water was virtually unavailable? Survival for the Nabataeans started with control of water. They weren't merely stone carvers, they were hydroengineers on a scale the ancient world had seldom known. Archaeologists found across Petra's valley an astonishing network: 36 dams to control flash floods, over 100 cisterns and reservoirs, and 125 miles of pipelines cut into rock. Springs, rain, and runoff were captured, channeled, stored, and distributed throughout the city with such accuracy that Petra didn't merely survive, it thrived. AI reconstructions showed that this system had not been cobbled together piecemeal over the centuries. Rather, it was drawn up on one grand master plan, as if the waterworks of the city had been planned beforehand and carried out with incredible prescience. Around this system revolved Ain Musa, or Spring of Moses, a source of water located roughly 5 miles away from Petra. There were ancient water channels that carried their flow through narrow grooves cut into the walls of the canyon, constructed with such precision that they did not leak or break under pressure. Simulating the pipeline slope using AI suggested that they inclined at an angle of approximately 4 degrees, by coincidence the exact angle engineers would today recommend for optimal water flow. The Nabataeans possessed sophisticated hydraulic concepts thousands of years before being documented by Western science. Water in Petra, nonetheless, was not only used as a source for practical use. It was a spectacle. Based on archaeologists, there were decorative fountains, running canals, and even an enormous garden pool complex nearly as large as an Olympic swimming pool. Picture walking through a hot desert, then into cities that have glistening fountains and pools that spray water up in the air, then forests of lush greenery grown in a region where nearly everything should not be able to grow. This was not great engineering, it was extravagant consumption, revealing the wealth and control. Artificial intelligence analysis of Petra's city plan also revealed that water elements were deliberately designed to impress visitors and further reinforce the reputation of the city as an oasis of power. However, with his creations, Petra's water system also involved some degree of risk. Flash floods posed to trespass the narrow canyon of Sikh, the very gateway into the city, with deadly ferocity. The Nabataeans built at least 5 dams and even made lateral 140-foot-long cuts in rock to redirect river courses to divert floodwaters away from their monuments. All these reconstructions imply that hundreds of computer-aided notes simulating flood suggested the project's success for centuries. Slowly, though, vulnerabilities into the system started to show, and there is indication that some protective dams breached, letting floodwaters wreak havoc into Petra's foundations and streets. The same thing that made Petra thrive ultimately also caused harm to it. It is this double meaning, which water brings redemption or makes ends mortal, that lies behind the entire tale of Petra. The AI showed that Nabataean waterworks were not only utilitarian infrastructures but were filled with redundancy, balance, and flow ratios, which revealed more profound philosophies. Water to Nabataeans was not only life, it is sacred, a force to be mastered, showcased, and revered. The fountains and pools were probably not built only for luxury, but as part of a coded system, a visible clue that Petra's survival was based on some tenuous balance. For while Petra lived on impossible plenty, AI learned that its designs weren't only expedient, they were mathematical. Geometry written in stone to the uninitiated tourist, Petra's monuments appear to be lovely tombs carved out for kings and traders. But when artificial intelligence reconstructed their proportions and compared them in hundreds of facades, a shocking pattern became